And we're on. Hello, good evening, everyone, and welcome to this very special Northern Pride Life panel discussion to mark the 30th International Day of Older Persons. It's a United Nations Day. It's been going for 30 years, as I say. I have personally never heard of it until this year. It's the 75th anniversary of the United Nations. It's also the year of the nurse and the midwife, so we're going to touch on that as our conversations develop. It's fair to say that COVID-19 has turned everyone's lives upside down this year. So what we've put together, socially distant, is a very, shall we say, extinguished panel of older LGBTQI people from across our region. And very shortly, I'm going to introduce you to all of those. So can we see the rest of the panel, please? Hello, everyone. I'm going to do it. Hello, Lynn. Hello, Rachel. Hello, Gary. How you doing?
All good, thank you.
Yes, good, thanks.
Good. Grand. Well, that was a seamless start because I was waiting for the counter time to go. And very focal. It's his age, you know. He can't do a thing. Quick round of introductions. Lynn, can we come to you first, please?
Certainly, I'm Lynn. I became part of the Pride Committee fairly recently, in the last year or so, as the Older Persons Engagement Officer, and that's why I'm here, I guess.
Grand. Rachel, can we come to you now, please?
I don't know how to start. I'm Rachel anyway. I'm a member of Northern Proud Voices. I've just been around in the scene. I don't know, really. I'm here. Hello.
Cool. Yeah, I'm sure lots more will come out, no pun intended, as the evening progresses. So thank you. Gary, can we come to you, please?
You can, yes. My name's Gary Short, otherwise known as Ophelia B, or Balls in the common area, but in posh places we just keep the B. I'm very proud to say I feel a young 56-year-old last week, so I don't feel my age. Hopefully I don't look my age, but I've been around a long, long time, and it's nice and a pleasure to be on the panel.
Grand, that's wonderful. Thank you all for being here this evening. I think probably what we're going to start with is just imagine yourself a year ago. What were the key issues for you as an older person? And I don't know why I was asked to do this, because of course I am only 39. You know, what qualification they thought I could possibly have to hold this on the same as you, Gary, 56. We don't look it. Imagine it was a year ago. What are the issues for the people in your part of our communities in terms of our well-being, in terms of our social inclusion, in terms of how we live our lives? We'll talk a little bit about our interaction with younger people, whatever they might be, as we go along. But just going to reflect on that a little bit. Before COVID, what were the key things that were challenges? What were the key things that were great? Gary, can I come to you first for this one?
Challenging for me personally has been my parents. I'm very lucky to still have both my parents. My dad's turning up to be 90 in December, and my mum's 85, but unfortunately she's fully dementia. She's in a home, and we call it now here, but I used to try and get up 3 and 4 times a week, and that was always in the back of my mind as a challenge to try and keep me dad chirped along, to make him feel motivated that he was still worth like going shopping and still worth coming to see me. So that was part of my, not worry, but part of my everyday concern, that I had to make sure he was doing all right, because my mother looked after him, sort of thing, and I just needed to make sure that he was going to be okay. Also, work with me. I've been self-employed for over 20 years, and I've never ever struggled for work, which is really good. And I've enjoyed my holidays, and I've got some lovely friends. So it did come to the point to think, hold on here, if work does dry up, what is going to happen? you know, the future is like my retirement age is about 10 years away. So I'm now putting into a private pension. I need to put in a bit more private pension. How can I afford to do that? We just moved into our own house a year ago before that. So we've been in 2 years now. So we needed a mortgage. So that was always in the back of my mind, how the mortgage was going to be paid, how my pension was going to be done. And then, so that was three major things that affected me about living, I suppose, and enjoying your life at the same time, but also like planning for the future and also trying to make sure that my parents are okay. So there were three major things that was always like wearing around for me.
Yeah, no, that's interesting. That puts quite a number of things in quite a lot of context. And I think those are shared issues for a lot of people. And my sense is that often LGBT people find themselves in a carer role for elderly parents, more so than perhaps married heterosexual siblings do, because you've got no family, you've got time, even if you actually have got family, but not one that they recognise. So that's something that very much resonates with me. So yeah, it's interesting. Lynn, could we come to you, please?
Mm-hmm. And I think, like Gary, you know, I've got an older mum who, she's in her 70s, so I guess, you know, not quite as old as Gary's parents. Sorry, Gary, I've suggested that your parents are okay.
It's fine.
But we also have a father-in-law who, you know, he lives on his own, and I think there's always in the back of our minds, it's, are they lonely? You know, what can we do to support them? And you know, I'm very fortunate in that my mum, she lives with my sister, so and I can be confident that my mum's not lonely, but obviously my father-in-law has that as well. But I think one of the things that I've felt as I've got a bit older is, as an individual, I feel like I've become a little bit invisible. And I think, you know, as you get older, you mature and you have things you want to share with people, but really nobody's interested in listening to what you have to say. And I think that's, you know, I don't know if that's common or not, but certainly it's something that I've felt. And I think that's why I wanted to get involved with the committee and doing some work with older people, so that, you know, from an individual point of view, I do feel unheard and invisible sometimes, and it you know, I felt that it would be good to start something whereby giving the older people a voice and a chance to air their views, that type of thing. And I think this time last year, it was when these ideas were formed in my head. You know, unlike Gary, I work for the NHS, so from a professional point of view, I haven't had to worry too much about work, and you know, there's kind of always work for me, which this pandemic has obviously proved. But in terms of the older community during the pandemic, obviously we've got, you know, it's affecting the older community far more than some of the younger people. So all of those things were, you know, a concern.
Interesting. I mean, I can certainly kind of what you're saying about feeling slightly invisible as you're older. Certainly, younger people, you feel it. What would the expression be? You don't have the sexual social capital. This is speaking as a gay man. It may be different for women, but you become invisible in that sort of sense. That was a really posh way of putting it. Any bugger fancies you new Mac, and you're not going on a bit, you know. But also, I personally find myself kind of editing what I'm going to say, because the younguns won't understand it. And there's that interaction of kind of, you're supposed to know who, I don't know, Rihanna or Taylor Swift or whatever. Mention Alma Cogan and you just get a blank look. And it's like, but that's your fault. And you get, oh, it's before my time. And it's like, well, it's before my bloody time, so was Napoleon. But I mean, come on, you know. So, but it is that thing. And I mean, I was tempted to start, and Gary, this will mean something to you, I hope, but not necessarily to the others. I was tempted to start with this, and that's why I was wrestling with my conscience to go, hello, I'm Mary Brazel, and I'm 42. Yes, 42. No, look, now most of my social network would know that as a Victoria Wood sketch, and they would know it word for word, and everybody would join in, and we would find it unreasonably funny and hysterical. But anybody under 30 who'd never seen that will go, what are you talking about? Who's Mary Brazel like? And it gets wearing to have to edit your stuff to suit young people. And it's like, how about you up in your game a little bit? Because we've got a lot to offer and we've been around a lot. And just take your time to listen. And no, I'm not buying you a drink, love, because you've got as much money as I have. And it's that kind of thing. So I think that's something that is, I think it's probably true of people getting older generally. And every older generation is disappointed in the younger generation because they're not as smart as we were. So anyway, Rachel, can I come to you, please?
I don't know. I think I might be the oldest person in this group. It's 60 years old. I was 60 in April, and but I don't feel like it, and I don't act like it, and I'm certainly very active. I don't know how many people know this, but I'm a very keen canoeist, canoeing on the sea and rivers and white water, and I do some quite extreme stuff. But last year, 2019, was probably one of the worst years for me, work-wise, relationship-wise. I was really, really down. And if it wasn't for friends from Northern Proud Voices, the support there, my local canoe club, helping me out, and my family. I've got a son and a daughter who fledged the nest there. They've left. They've gone to university, and one's actually working he's down in Liverpool now. So it's difficult because they're away, and you want to go and see them, and you want the support from family. But the friends around in the northeast were great. So that's it, basically.
That's good to hear.
Sorry, Jack?
Yes, I mean, you'll never get me in a canoe, love. It's like not with my creaky old bones, but I mean, I think that's interesting as well because a lot of people who are involved in sport, we were denied that opportunity when we were young, in many ways. So it's great to see organisations like Newcastle Ravens and is it Northern Front Runners and Newcastle Front Runners? I can never remember which. Remember what PE was like for school at school?
No, I hated it.
For LGBT people, Gary, yeah, please.
I hated PE. I despised it. We had a 2.5K cross-country run that I never done in 5 years. I always managed to find a note or an excuse or a sickie that I'd never done, and I'm so pleased. I can honestly say I've never done it in 5 years. It petrified me running.
But I mean, a lot of that is just that whole thing of, I mean, because back in our day, PE was they chucked you out in the cold and chucked a football at you, and you were supposed to know what to do. Well, I didn't know. Just because you're a Geordie, you're supposed to know how to play football. I didn't have a damn clue, So it's and I think that perhaps set us up in ways where our social lives were much more limited than perhaps our heterosexual brothers and sisters. I mean, does that have resonance for some of you as well?
I feel like there's more sports out there than football. Firstly, I was shocked when I was seeing the news about the support that's being offered to the major league clubs, and they've got so much money out there. Fair enough, I know this is going to probably get a few comments here. Their gate, obviously, they've lost the income from ticket sales on some of the gates, but so is all the other sports, and it's the businesses at the end of the day. I'm part of a community charity sports club, and we have to survive on memberships. So, I mean, obviously, we'll be talking later on about this year in COVID-19, but I feel that other smaller sports are forgotten about.
Yeah, I think as well. I mean, for people of our generation, often just that wasn't open to us. It wasn't something that we could even entertain because it was problematic. Certainly for gay men of a certain age, the experience of the changing room in sports and what you were expected to do, and if you had absolutely no hand-to-eye coordination like I had, and you just all you got was a PE teacher going like that. And it was a very dispirited experience. And Gary, you're nodding there. So
This is
yeah.
I'll have to tell you this. This was I wanted to become a chef when I was taking your options when you were about 12 or 13, and the school I was at was Bladen, and it was governed by Gator County Council, and it hadn't been heard of for a guy to go and do cookery. You had either woodwork, metalwork, technical drawing, or home economics, and I wanted to do the home economics. And there was like, oh my goodness, a guy wants to do home economics, you know, and they allowed me to do it. And I was the only guy out of 200 in Bladen Comprehensive Schools doing home economics on a Wednesday afternoon with all of the girls.
Fantastic. And I bet they were just doing toast and you were making like kind of like croquembouche and all that kind of thing. That explains the very fancy kitchen you're in.
Trailblazer, Gary.
Sorry, Lynn.
A trailblazer.
Say that again, Lynn.
Yeah.
Say that again,
A
Lynn.
trailblazer.
Exactly. So when we're allowed cakes, gluten-free, like full-on dinner, that our reward after that when we can. We'll check it. So keep paying that mortgage, Gary, because we don't want it repossessed before the lockdown's over. Okay.
I love my cooker. I need my cooker. I love it.
Fabulous. Brian,
can we just go back to school a little bit? And I think
absolutely we can. Yes.
You know, not particularly about sport, but just school in general. And I think obviously schools are time in secondary school particularly where you're questioning what your identity is going to be. And I was at school in the 80s, a teenager in the 80s, and I think one of the things, and the saying of how can you be what you can't see rings very true to me, because there weren't any major images for me for people who I thought that I was going to go into, if you know what I mean. So it took a lot of courage to do things like that Gary's done there, to kind of actually stand up and say, yeah, I might be a boy, but I want to do home economics. You know what I mean? It takes a lot of it. I think it took more courage then to do those type of things than it does now.
Definitely.
Absolutely.
I did have the mick taken out of me. I really did. You know, it was I was like, I wasn't like Red Riding Hood with a basket, you know, with a gingham top. I wasn't like that. I would have me haversack, and I would be taking all my ingredients into class with a haversack, and I would plan. And my mother helped me really, really well, and would sit down the night before and plan all of this. And I did get ridiculed by a lot of the guys, but I just had to walk past it, and that stood me in good stead, I think, to stand up for myself.
I think that's a really important point you've made there, Lynn, of how can you be what you can't see. And I think it's a very different experience, and I think it's very hard for people who didn't live through that to put themselves into that mindset of, because the only things we saw in the media relating to us were, I mean, I remember being mercilessly bullied. Do you remember the Jeremy trial with Norman Scott, where it's all that kind of thing? Now, my surname as a child was Scott, so you can imagine the kind of jibing that was happening, because it was Norman Scott was this very willowy man that Jeremy Thorpe. Did I say Jeremy Hardy? I meant Jeremy Thorpe. Had this kind of secret affair with. Oh, bless him. And Google it. There was a TV movie last year, folks. For those who don't know what I'm talking about. But it was about, and it was on the news every night, this trial, and it was hell at school the next day. Similarly, the day after an episode of Are You Being Served, and all the I'm free type thing. There were no positive images. No, there was nothing. And I think, as far as lesbians were concerned, there was not. I think if you stayed up late and saw the Killing of Sister George on BBC Two, that would have. I think that was probably the only thing that I ever saw as a teenager.
Yeah, well, I remember the kind of that lesbian kiss in Brookside, and I think that was in the 80s. Was it maybe in the 80s, maybe in the early 90s? But actually made the national news, and I think really, but that was the first kind of image that I saw of kind of affection between lesbians. Do you know what I mean? And it wasn't on TV. I mean, now, you know, on ads and that type of thing, you see, you know, gay men, lesbians. So it was really, it was such a different experience in the 80s, I think, particularly.
And for you, Rachel, I'm assuming that there was even less kind of coverage on TV or anything, and certainly very little that would be positive. Would I be right in saying that?
You're dead right there. Probably the first sort of like clues as to my identity was seeing, you know, Top of the Pops in the 80s, and you know, the glam bands, Boy George and the gender benders, gender sort of like pop bands. It was all sort of like, wow, this has something that's you know, sort of like it brought things out and made me realise just there's something there. I mean, I joined the RAF from school, which was difficult. It was illegal to be gay in the forces then, and to be trans, that was definitely a no-go. And I knew even back then that there was things happening. I wasn't feeling who I should be, and I was just trying to sort of like be who I'm supposed to, who everybody thought I was. So I followed my brothers into the RAF. I even did I was a vehicle fitter, so working under cars and getting all dirty and mucky. It was a job I could do, but it wasn't me.
And I think one thing that's probably, I'll bring something, I'll step away from being the host and just talk a little bit from my own experiences. This will come as no great surprise to anybody, so I don't think I'm revealing too much. It's because I might be 56, but I've been living with HIV since the age of 31. So it's been quite an interesting journey, and I think certainly I find moving back to the Northeast 6 years ago, it was for the first time in my life, it was something that I felt that I had to kind of keep a little bit quiet about. Which didn't sit very well with me. So that's that come to an end. And I think for many of us of around the same age, the whole thing around HIV and the absolute terror, the way that information was put out to us in a very cack-handed way, no pun intended, didn't really enable us to have healthy sex lives. So just put it that context has to be there as well. And I think just echoing that point that Lynn had made of how do you be what you can't see, somehow we did, and here we are. And I think that's, shall we say it's character building, because I think it's fair to say we've got a panel full of characters. So all that kind of thing of, the kiddies will be corrupted by this influence of LGBT, whatever it was. We had no influence whatsoever.
No.
But here we are. So do you know what I mean? It's just like, it's absolute bollocks. And am I allowed to say that? Am I allowed to say bollocks? Oh, too late already. Let's move on and talk about the deep joy. The deep joy. Hang on. Oops. Just the lighting. Get socially distant. Let's talk about COVID.
Oh, come on then, let's.
Okay. Who wants to go first? Sorry, that was really poor taste. Come on. What's it meant for you, Gary, COVID? What's the impact been?
Well, It meant in late February, early March, I was very, very ill. I haven't had a test, but I know that we both had it, Keith, my partner, and me. We both had temperatures at 39 plus. We couldn't move. We were ill. We weren't wanting to eat. We just lay for weeks on the settee with deliveries getting knocked at the door. We had metal tastes in the mouth. It was just awful. We recovered from that. And then with me being self-employed, no work at all. Didn't get furloughed the way it was. A long story, but literally didn't have 1 penny for 15 weeks. Not
Oof.
1 penny. So I had to go with into my little rainy day savings and some help and assistance. Worked a little bit in the bars since the bars opened again, doing hosts, but not for much money. So my job really hasn't been, it's been forgot about, you know. So I've had to move direction a little bit. But I was from being out 5 nights a week, I was in 7 nights a week. So it was such a big change for me. Also, Keith, my partner, works for British Airways. So he was still working, lucky enough. And overload of work. Everyone needed refunds and stuff and flight changes and stuff. So he was kept going. So we've had an office in the dining room, and then we've popped him upstairs. So at least there's a main income coming in, and I've been getting little bits as and when I can. So that had a really a big worry for both of us, really. You know, where I was normally the breadwinner, I was no longer the breadwinner, which felt a bit like weird for me, where I've never ever relied on anybody. I've always done what I want, when I wanted, how I wanted to, go on holiday, have lunch, have dinner, go out with friends, and it's never ever been like an issue. But because there was no money coming in, fair enough, I wasn't spending as much, but my bank account was going down and down and down and down, and that has never happened to me for a long time. So that then clocked on mortgage. How are we going to pay the mortgage? What about my pension? And all of this started again from where we said a year ago. I was thinking this because I was getting older, and then I'm 6 months older when COVID starts, and then you've got the worry of all of these things again, but in a much bigger dosage of it. But to keep myself going, I started cooking, which I really loved, and it was time. We had a lovely May. So I was in the garden doing loads of gardening, planting seeds and bulbs and doing things on the cheap and getting cuttings and everything. And I think if it wasn't for me cooking every cake under the sun and planting every bulb and fruit and veg, potatoes, carrots, sweet corn, tomatoes, I might not be here these days. So that has kept me sane. But that's been my COVID 6-7 months, really.
That's it. So basically, you turned into Tom and Barbara.
Good life.
Well, that's the last time I played the tart for you, Jerry. So. Wow. And what about you? What about you? Kind of. It would be fair to say that certainly in your performing life, you are very much an extrovert. I don't know if that's true of you. You don't strike me as an introvert who's an extrovert once he's got his frock on. How has that affected you mentally? Because an extrovert needs an audience.
Well, a lot of people in my field have went online and done DJs or done little stories and shows, and I felt as though for me or for Ophelia that wasn't what was needed. I didn't feel as though it was right for Ophelia B to do that. And I'm not saying it was wrong for anybody that's watching who is a drag queen or an entertainer that done that and put a PayPal up, please buy me a drink or please donate. There's nothing wrong with that at all, and needs must. But for me, I just didn't feel it was right to do. I'd done something for Sunderland Pride and I helped Northern Pride out, and that was really good because I felt there was a purpose for that. But just to go online and put my eyelashes on and a wig and tie to Ophelia and play tunes, and I just didn't think there was a need. I just felt as though, I'm not that I was bigger or better than anybody. Don't get me wrong. I'm not trying to say that. I just felt as though Ophelia B is a character that's something that maybe she wouldn't have done, so I didn't do it.
Is that, I wonder if that's partly because you personally you don't get the audience feedback in the same way, so there might be kind of quite a few layers to that, but also it might be true to say that the online usage perhaps didn't suit your audience. It wouldn't be something that your audience in particular would do. Would that be fair to say?
I think
And there's
that's
a
what it
number
was
of kind of
more about. I think it was just I think people might have got a shock if they saw me on there. Maybe, you know, and
they need you in 3D.
Need to be a bigger camera. You know, the amount of cake I've ate.
Wide angle lens, love. Wide angle lens. Come on. Sorry, Lynn. Could we come to you on this point? Oh, sorry, Gary.
Sorry, I've been lucky enough just to do a little. Just last weekend, I work a lot with club kids, and they've done a little tour. And a week ago, I went to see a show with the UK club kid, the UK drag race, the Vivian and Bagger, and they asked me to join them this weekend. So that was brilliant. So I've been uplifted. Last weekend, I was working in London in a theatre, and then Liverpool on Sunday night, Southampton on Monday night, and I was the host for these shows, and it just give me some like meaning back. It give me some. I'm really like I could put some nice rhinestones on my ears and a lovely big, you know, and I felt as though I'd missed this and I was back on form, you know. So it was just nice to get back in.
Before we move on, I'm going to ask honesty time. Did you have an evening where you just dressed up at home, where you weren't going out anywhere, just to keep it going? Did you have Did you have an Ophelia night just to yourself?
No.
I don't bloody believe you.
No, I didn't. No,
I did. Anyway, Lynn, can we come to you, please?
Yeah. Well, I've worked throughout COVID. I'm a nurse by background, so you know, I have worked. I guess I keep saying that I'm not really frontline. I'm more back in that it's my job to get people out of hospital. But obviously the professional impact on me, there's been a lot of changes at work, the way we do our work. You know, we're sat in a team office where we're now sitting in individual offices, so we don't have, you know, it's a challenge work-wise. Still is a bit of a challenge work-wise. From a kind of personal point of view, while I was at work, my wife was working from home, and there was sometimes, I think the difficulty when you work from home is that you can't always cut off, and you can't say, oh well, it's 5 o'clock, I'm leaving my desk now, in the way that you might do at work. So there was often times I would come home from doing a 12-hour shift, for example, and she might still be having conversations on the telephone, which I felt really impacted on our personal time, if that makes sense. And I think, like everybody in those very early days of COVID, there was that anxiety about, you know, am I going to be safe? Am I going to be well? Am I going to be alive this time next year? And I think, you know, we've all kind of lived with that anxiety for, you know, for a while now. It feels like we're coming back around to that a little bit. But it's obviously about keeping yourself safe and keeping your family safe. And you know, we did things like stopped seeing our parents, stopped seeing the children that we would see regularly. We stopped doing all of that. And a lot of that was based on the fact that I worked in a hospital, and, you know, we knew that the risks were going to be high, for me particularly, and then passing that on to somebody else. So, you know, we did become quite a little island as a couple, I suppose, which I think's been a good thing, because I think it's helped us realise what's important in life, and you don't need to be spending a whole load of money going out or whatever, and as long as you've got like a supportive person with you, then you've got a lot to be thankful for. So I suppose there's some positives and some negatives. I mean, I think like Gary, there was times when I was off work where I thought, what am I going to do? So I went into the kitchen, I experimented with food. We bought bikes this year as well because we felt the need to. I think it's all very well sitting in your own little anxiety bubble, but you need to get out of that bubble and get some exercise, get some fresh air. So I think the way we thought we would do that was kind of getting a bike. So we've both bought bikes this year, and I've become a bit of a bike nerd, I think. And everybody I talk about my bike. So there's, I think there's been negatives and there's been positives. I think it's not all negative, but it's been tough. It has been a tough year, and a very changeable one, hasn't it? Yeah. So.
Yeah. Rachel, could we come to you? And what's your experience been, and what's it meant for members of your your part of our communities?
Yeah. I've continued working throughout COVID as a key worker in healthcare. So that's nothing changed there. Basically going to work and then doing my shift and then coming back home and then start again, sort of thing. Doing some extra hours because of shorter staff and things like that. So because I haven't been going out saving lots of money, which has been nice. Because I've been doing extra shifts and then also saving. The biggest impact for me was I had planned my 60th birthday celebration up in Scotland in April, where lots of friends were going to be coming up with me. We were going to canoe 60 miles down the River Spey in 60 miles over 3 days. So 60 miles from 60th birthday. And that was all put on hold. Northern Proud Voices had to stop meeting, which was, miss out on meeting all my friends. That was really hard. And then hearing news like the committee, Northern Proud Voices Committee, had to cancel Hand in Hand, which was supposed to happen in 2021, which was devastating news. I was really looking forward to Hand in Hand. I've attended the events in Manchester 4 years ago and Cardiff last year. Excellent events.
Could you just tell us a bit more about what Hand in Hand is for people who don't know what it is? Yes,
of course. Hand in Hand is where all the LGBTQI communities, choirs, come together at a venue every 2 years, and they put on performances, and it's open to the public. It's open to anybody to come along. But they attract in the region of, it has grown and grown. I think the first one was in London, and then Manchester, and then Cardiff, and this next year was going to be Gateshead, Newcastle. They attract 30 plus choirs from all over the country, and this next year was going to attract choirs from abroad as well, from overseas, which was going to be great. And you're talking about 1,000 people coming to these events. The people that are supporting, the volunteers behind the scenes. So we had the stage all booked up, ready in Hall 1 and Hall 2. I think the committee had done a fantastic job. We'd already started fundraising for the choir. Northern Proud Voices choir had started fundraising. We'd started applying for grants. We had accommodations booked for 600 plus people in student accommodation, and then were in negotiations with the local hotels to get discounted prices for people booking up who wanted a bit higher end accommodation than student accommodation. It was going to be massive for Newcastle, for the Newcastle community, and putting Newcastle on the map. So choir finished. Since sport was our sport, I was going out kayaking, thinking I could do my activity, my my exercise, my daily exercise on the water, as opposed to people that want to run or cycle. And then I was told, no, well, that's not actually acceptable, which was a big hit for me when I was probably more socially distanced on the water than people on a bike or running. And then once we were allowed to start operating, then I started operating in our local canoe club. I've also been doing a lot of freelance work down at Cullercoats, taking people on guided tours through the middle of Newcastle as a freelancer. So that's been helpful for my own sanity and to meet people. So yeah, that's what it is.
It's interesting because if I mean, my experience is, and for gay men of my generation and slightly older as well, for a lot of people, our social lives, our LGBT social lives, involved going to a pub, involved going to the local gay pub, and it's a bit like the Cheers syndrome. You wouldn't necessarily arrange to meet people there, but you would rock up at what was your local gay pub, and you'd spend the evening with people there, and you would expect to see different people there, but you wouldn't arrange to meet them. And what I'm conscious of, certainly I know from friends of mine, once that was taken away, they weren't having that social interaction with those people, and it's quite a common thing, and certainly for gay men, I would say possibly over 65, they didn't have the phone numbers of those friends. They're not necessarily on Facebook and all that kind of thing. In many cases, they didn't even know the surname of those friends, and that's kind of emblematic of where people were sort of pre-Wolfenden, partial decriminalisation. Was you didn't have people's phone numbers, because if you got arrested for something, the police would go through your phone book and see who were your known associates, and they'd all bloody get arrested as well. So I think there's certainly for older gay men, I'd say over 65. Their life patterns are such as meant, and their ways of socializing has meant a devastating impact of COVID, because they haven't got that. Especially if they live alone, they are completely isolated in many ways from the rest of the people in their community. Does that have any resonance for anyone else? Does that make sense? Does do people recognise that?
It does for me. I've got a gay friend called John who's 83, and I haven't rang him every day or every week, but he's always been in my thoughts. And if he hasn't rang me, I've rang him. And I've got another friend who's 67, and or just dropped a text or see how he's doing. And as people have with me, the way my life is, I feel as though I have a lot of younger people around me who keep me young. And they really do. And if it wasn't for my younger generational friends, I would be lost. I've got a big cross section of friends from I'll say 22 up to 83, and they're all important to me. And mid range between 20 and 35, I just get on so well with. I don't know if they like having an older guy as a friend, or if it's me liking to have younger people as a friend, but I find that's where I gel. I gel with people who are younger than me. I can be out all night having well, when we could, having a drink and a social time, and coming at 3 o'clock and go, oh, is that all the time it was? You know, it would really make me feel young and maybe determined to do things and keep pushing me. But then I have older friends, as I said, who I would always maybe try and just keep in contact. Maybe I'll do like 2 or 3 rings every couple of weeks, you know, just to say, hi, John, hi, Trev, how are you doing? Are you all right? Or a little text. And so I'm in the middle. I felt as though the younger people have looked after me, and I've still made contact with the older people that I know.
That's interesting. Yeah, that's interesting. But you recognise the scenario I was describing.
Totally.
You know, that people whose social lives are, I don't want to say barfly, because that sounds really quite pejorative, but that's not how it means. But maybe not feeling confident enough to actually to arrange with people to meet them. You know, I think there's lots of different layers of that, and I think part of whether you see people as part of our community or not, but when you've got people who are say say men who are in heterosexual marriages who are exploring other sides of their sexuality and are occasional visitors to some darkened establishments, shall we say. What's that going to have meant from them? We don't necessarily embrace them into our community, but they are part of it in a way, in many ways, and it's that avenue for them is going to be completely missed. And then the whole thing of the dating apps and things like that, the interdynamic between older and younger people is very much assumed to be a financially transactional one, shall we say, at times. Speaking in euphemism, where does that go at the moment? Because if you went on to what's euphemistically known as the yellow Facebook, and if there's somebody in there, whatever, because you want to say, we're in lockdown, you dozy get, what you playing at, kind of thing, or words to that effect. So I think there's many of the different ways that our community has changed in the way that people meet each other and socialize has been deeply impacted by COVID. We've talked for years about how the kind of using our spaces, our community spaces, and our commercial community spaces has changed, and the impact of the dating apps and things like that. I wrote an article a bit back where I described as the art of cruising is as archaic and obsolete as a cave painting, and even then I had to explain what I meant. And and that's been cut through just about all the ways that we can interact with each other have been massively impacted this year. And you just wonder where it's going to go next. Where do you think we're going to go next? And what does it mean for older people in our communities? Any thoughts?
Well, I'm probably the only single person here, I think, and I use dating apps, but find them a waste of time, and I'd rather go out and meet somebody and to find out more about them and them to find out about myself and what type of person I am. You can't get that on a dating app. And I want to go down and meet people. I want to go to Manchester. I miss Pride events. The Pride events last year was brilliant, and I was there volunteering as a volunteer, but it was great just meeting people there.
Yeah, I think that's one of the things as well with that whole kind of dating app being based on appearance. It's just like if there's this strange value put on youth and whatever it is. I mean, anybody can do that like that and put a filter on, can't they? Do you know what I mean? It's just like, and it's like personality counts and is far more important. And you can't see, you can't see that you don't really like the look of them because they stand funny through a picture on a dating app. It's all that subliminal stuff. Or what I get is, you're much shorter than I expected. So,
going back
anyway,
here,
Lynn,
sorry, Lynn.
Say again, my darling.
Lynn.
I don't think I was going to say anything, but I think it's not just dating, is it? Do you know what I mean? It's about, like you say, connection with friends, acquaintances. It's all been impacted. But like you say, I think we do have a bit of a, most people have met a friend or whatever in a bar, and I think that that is something that in the UK where it's quite common, regardless of what community you come from. So I think, but yes, I think you're right in that the kind of the LGBT plus community has probably been impacted much more by that. And I think I think one of the things about, if we go back to the Pride event, I think one of the things that I really enjoy about Pride and about Northern Pride is the march at the beginning, and that sense of unity, and it crosses. It doesn't just it's the community plus allies. Do you know what I mean? So I think that there's an element of that we're missing as well. Do you know what I mean? It's not just us, but there's allies, and I've certainly missed that this year, because it's like, actually, we know that there are people out there supporting us as a community, but it's like when you can't see them, it's like, are they really there? It makes you feel a bit, oh well, I'm on my own. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I mean, there's not an awful lot of women's venues or women's friendly venues, say in the Newcastle gay scene, there are women there, but it's generally a heterosexual stag night, that kind of thing. Do you think that's meant in some ways that COVID has impacted on you less because there just aren't venues and spaces that you would go? I'm not asking that of Lynn and Rachel. Will that be true?
There is a women's group that has been meeting recently. They do the football, and they were doing the rounders. It's the S Club North group, great group of girls. Pull everybody together. Sam Triggs is a fantastic person that leads quite heavily on that area, and it's just about getting people active, but also socializing. They go for the dinner after their football game, football games. They've also been doing netball as well. So, that has been happening since they were allowed to.
Yeah.
So hopefully that'll continue on the Sundays anyway. The rounders on a Tuesday night have now finished because it's too dark.
So ordinarily, you're never at home. So I can see why COVID's been a big challenge for you. And Gary, where do you think we're going to go from here? That isn't an offer.
Well, you can pick me up in 10 minutes. I'm near the Metro Centre.
I've got a clicky hip. I cannot.
But just going back quickly to the bars. You know, I mean, not only in the Newcastle, but I think across the northeast and also maybe across the UK, there's been a big slump, and that to me is because people don't need to come out now. When we went in the 80s, we needed to come out. We didn't have one of these. We didn't have a mobile phone, you know, so we needed to come out to speak to people, to meet people. As Lynn said, we wanted to have the contact. You know, you wanted to see, as Rachel said, you wanted to the socialized aspect. And for people who wanted just sex, you had to come out. You know, you couldn't get this. I call this your dial-a-dick and phone a fairy. You know, that's what it is. You know, it is. It's there on. It's like a pizza. You know, my perfect opportunity is get a man and then have sex, and then he turns into a pizza. You know, that's what happens. No, but it's there, and I think because of that,
I can't remember that far back.
It's an old joke from an old movie. I think so. The bars aren't as busy because people don't want to come out. Lifestyles have changed. Hours of working have changed. You know, and people getting older maybe don't come out 3 or 4 times a week. They only come out once or twice a week. Or maybe I've noticed a big decline in ladies working on the scene. There's nowhere at all for groups of girls, ladies, and people to come. It's just mainly gay guys and the heterosexual people that come for a good night, you know, and I feel that's a bit sad.
I think there's something that's been lost in the bars of, and I was making that joke about cruising being as obsolete as cave painting. That was half the fun of going out. And not to put too fine a point on it, you have a few pints and whatever, and you'd cock off, and the sex would usually be pretty shite anyway, because you're hammered. You got far more fun and excitement and ego boost out of doing what we used to call a Betty Grable, which is that over-the-shoulder look of kind of what and whatever. It was the thrill of the chase, and it was the cut and thrust and all that kind of thing. And there's absolutely no appeal in going, what you into, fun. And then they get, and it's like, well, your idea of fun and my idea of fun are probably 2 very different things, darling. So, do you know any show tunes? It's a very characterless. It's the equivalent of flicking through an Argos catalogue rather than walking around John Lewis.
Yeah, that's a good way of putting it.
Yeah. So, okay, we're moving to. I'm sorry, Rachel.
On the dating app side of things, I feel I look at some of the women on the apps and then think, oh, you wouldn't be able to keep up with me. I'm too active. So you just swipe right.
Yeah. And it's not a good way. It's not a good way for humans to interact, and it commodifies us, and I think it cheapens us, and I think it harms us. And I personally, it was difficult enough coming out in my teens. out in the wilds of Rowlandsgill, where I grew up, with one stagecoach a week when everything was in black and white to get into Newcastle. And when the yard was the courtyard and you had to knock 3 times and ask for Edna and do all that kind of thing, it was difficult enough then when, as we say, you couldn't be what you couldn't see. But I would absolutely hate to be 16, 17, 18, coming out now and finding my way into the gay world, being through Grindr and stuff like that. It would be absolutely loathsome. I'd rather go back to having Margaret Thatcher as Prime Minister in Clause 28 than to live under that self-created for our community horror and cheapening. What are your views? Anybody?
I think it's soulless, I think, is what I would say, because like Rachel said, you can't tell what somebody's personality is like just by looking at a picture on an app. Do you know what I mean? I think it's like you say, as difficult as it was, we were out meeting people and, you know, figuring out what it is we're like and we don't like and that type of thing. And I think there's a lot of that being lost in today's generation.
Yeah.
Listen to me.
And I think it's interesting just reflecting on after Pride each year. I mean, the amount of work that you guys and the committee and the organisers and the volunteers put in to put it together. And after Pride, you'll get somebody going, "Oh, I didn't like the boy band. I never heard of that boy band from 10 years ago. I didn't like that. And the queue was too big for the beer tent, and it was ever." And it was like, for Christ's sake, the bigger world than just having a beer and standing and listening to the record. You know, it's like participate in things. The thing is, what we've all described as being involved in a community, doing something, whether that's entertaining people, whether that's getting involved in community choirs and singing, whether that's getting involved in sport, whether that's getting involved in things like Pride, or for years I was a volunteer with Switchboard. So it was actually, that is a far better way of doing things with and for your community and getting to know people. So switch off the telly, get out the house when we're allowed out, and volunteer with some local organisations. That's what I'm going to say, because because to quote Alison Steadman, "I promise you, Ange, you'll notice the difference." That's another one that the young'uns wouldn't get. Abigail's party. So there we go. I've totally stepped outside my role as host now. What I'd like to come to now, Lynn, would you tell us a little bit about Northern Pride's Generations project?
It's been something that's been we've thought about, and how we can better reach both the younger and the older generations and bring them together, because obviously what we feel is that there's things to be learned from both sides, and to be able to bring everybody together, because everybody's got journey, everybody's got a story, regardless of how young or how old you are. And I think that, you know, that's what it's about, really. We want to try and provide spaces, promote health and contact and all of those things. So it's been a couple of years in the making, and so, you know, quite early days, but COVID has really impacted on what we can and can't do. So
sure. And I think the next steps after this, I mean, we're going to have some conversations about it, but I think it will be interesting to find out more about what older people in our communities want and will get involved in. There's an old mucker of mine that I'm going to drag up by his heels from London, who works for AGK Camden's Opening Doors project for old LGBTQ people across London. And in Leeds, there's a fabulous project with the most wonderful name, Friends of Dorothy, an older gay men's project. And I just think that's the most fantastic name. I think there's a lot we can learn, and there's a lot that we can adapt. And I think there's a lot that we need. I mean, I know that AGK Gateshead has a project, but what True Colours that I did help to set up. But what happens in practice is one person goes 1 week, and one person goes another week. So we're going to sort something with him and get everybody who's ever been to go at the same time, because people go on to, "Oh, there was nobody here," and it's like, get out the door. there's no point in going and twisting, saying there's nobody here. It's like we've got to make it for each other, you know. And that, I think that's the way forward. So, any final thoughts? And then I'm going to ask Gary to do us a little to grab a tea towel, pretend it's a feather boa, and then close us down with a song.
My thoughts are, I'll take us to America and maybe other countries, but I think, right, with my mother going into care over the last 18 months, and she's well looked after, and I know that, and I can't see her, and I know that she's safe, and she's warm, and she's fed, and I'm happy with that. But I think, like, dementia, we're living longer, Alzheimer's and dementia is around there, and everybody gets it. It's not just straight people or heterosexual people. There's gay people, and if gay people aren't married or with a partner and don't have family, where are these people going to go? Are they going to feel comfortable going into a home, you know, that's meant for maybe geared up for heterosexual people? So do we need to look forward and plan something that caters for the LGBT plus community when they get older? And I think America maybe or Canada have maybe things already in place. And I think we need to maybe look over there and see what we can maybe learn from that for our future.
I think we could look closer to home a little for that as well, Gary, because I know in Manchester there's some projects around that, and I think, you know, I think because we're a relatively small sized community here, and I think there are ways that we could look in for the mainstream older people's provision to be more LGBT friendly, rather than us necessarily going back into a kind of closet, not closet, but into a set. I think there's a number of ways that we can address what mainstream provision is like to make it sure that it's LGBTQI suitable, because it's all right, it's there in the Equality Act. Only us is going to make it happen. If we all disappear off and have our teeth taken away from us and whatever, I mean, what does it mean for me if I get dementia and I'm 70 and around my HIV medication? I've got no way of keeping that quiet. What if somebody's coming, you know, there are extra issues there and that kind of thing. And also, you know, that's something that's going to impact all of us on different ways. If somebody isn't trans friendly or whatever, you know.
I've just bought Shirley Bassey's brand new album today. I mean, it's released in November. I mean,
she's still alive.
Of course she is. How dare you? She's a James. How dare you? It's coming out in November. I want to take that CD with me and play that in my little care home, you know. So who's going to make sure that they can let me listen to Shirley Bassey, you know, and let me maybe, you know, and that's what I'm saying. I want to make sure that I've got things around it that I recognise and I'm happy around, you know.
We fought too hard and too long to have to pretend to be something else like we had to when we were teenagers, again, at the end of our lives. We fought too hard for it, and I'm not going to fucking do it. So it's, you know, it's like, oh, there we go. Rachel, any final thoughts from you?
Firstly, about the album, I've just seen an advert on Spotify. Deep Purple have brought out a new album, and that'll be the one that I'll be going for, as opposed to Shirley Bassey. So Deep Purple is my cup of tea, although I do have a wide range of music tastes. As far as moving forward goes, the younger trans community, stay positive, get active. Sports clubs aren't scary. It's all inclusive. They do have policies in place and also very accepting. I was a part of the trans group getting people swimming. I took them regularly to Fenton Pool when it was open, and I found funding from Pride Sport. So anything to do with being active in sport is a positive thing, and I saw those people gelling together, having great fun, and being a little community together, and that's really important. As far as the older community goes, we are getting older, but you don't have to act your age. You can be as daft or as silly or as young as you want, or as young as the woman that you're feeling.
So like a fine wine, we're going to come to you, Lynn. That's it for your final thoughts.
Oh, no, I feel put on the spot now. I've totally lost my train of thought.
That was an opportunity. It wasn't a demand. If you feel like you've said, I think we'll come back into the main thing, and I think we'll get Gary to get his tea towel. And I think I'd like to say, and I'm sure Steve will fade us out because he doesn't know the words. So whatever, I'm not going to join in because I don't want to crack the glass. What I'd like to say is thank you very, very much for each of you on the panel. And if there's anyone out there listening, because we've had no damn questions, I'm hoping there are people listening. If there aren't, you've missed a damn good chat, and it's your own fault. I think what we'll do is we'll try and bring something together again. With a little bit more running and a bit more publicity, and I think maybe we'll try and get some speakers in about running LGBT services for older people in other parts of the country, and things that we can learn from and develop and really try to get things moving. I think that would be a really nice opportunity to do. So thank you very much. If you're going to sing, Pet, make sure nothing gets bounced off that mantel shelf, because you know when you hit the top C. Thanks, guys.
You're welcome. Well, it just so happens Shirley Bassey, a brand new album, not out today, but it's all released. So I've just borrowed from Shirley Bassey. So we'll have a little sing song. Thanks for tuning in, guys, and thank you for being a perfect host, Stu. Cheers, Rachel. Cheers, Lynn.
Yes,
I am my own special creation. So come take a look. Give me the hook or the ovation. See you later, everybody. Bye.